We are broadcasting. Just wait for our attendees. If there are any.
Good evening, everybody. This is the annual meeting for October 19th. I'll go through the agenda. No, I do the roll call first. That goes for the agenda first, and then we'll do roll call and take everything. After roll call, there are two public hearings on the agenda. First is a continuation of Market Landing Park expansion and the restroom and visitor facility. A special permit under the downtown overlay district. And the second agenda item for public hearings is for 6 Washington Street, a special permit. And then there's general business, approval of the minutes from our previous meeting and other updates. Let me start with the roll call. Alderman Clark.
Here.
Leo. Here. Ray Tainter.
Here.
Richard Yeager.
Here.
Bob Cow.
Here.
Don Walters.
Here.
Pennington.
Here.
Ms. Sontek here. I want to take these two public hearings out of order because the second one for 6 Washington Street has been requested for a continuance, so we're not going to talk about it tonight. We just need a motion to continue it.
So moved.
Thank you, Don.
I'll second.
Alden, second. And all those in favor, I have to do roll call. Alden?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Richard? Richard, are you paying attention? Yes.
You're muted, Richard, sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes.
Well, thank you. Robert, Bob?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And Bonnie, yes. So we will hear from them on November 2nd. So, Alden. Okay. So we will now turn it over to Sasaki for the discussion on the visitor facility and related issues.
Thanks. See you again. This one. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, I'll go through what a lot of you have seen already. Like, everyone hasn't seen it, but I'm going to go through it again.
Is this absolutely necessary?
It's up to you.
We're all here, so why don't you move on to the next?
We can move on if you want.
Yes,
Okay, you know the site. We've been there. This is an updated image that shows the transformer for the EV spaces in back. And that is the size that we've been given and the setbacks. We're showing the fence around all 4 sides. There's a gate on the north side that would open up to allow access. That fence is the same style as what we're using for the trellis on the 2 sides of the restroom. And there's some images of it later in the presentation that you'll see. This next slide. The plan we've seen in the next. The resilience, we're setting it at elevation 15.33. We've shown this slide before. The only difference here is that we've added, again, for resilience, I'm showing in this drawing, as well as the elevation drawing that was submitted with this presentation. We sort of what we're calling knockouts, those 2 boxes underneath for access for future potential to lift the building if needed. Next. Precedent of the Harbor Master Building. Various Newburyport buildings that are influential. Some contemporary buildings or contemporary details that we're interested in instilling in this building. Material slide few things I've added here were the hardware, door hardware. And this is going to relate to the signage, which comes up later, the color for the signage. So we're proposing for door hardware, which would be hinges, handles, sort of metal trim that you would see, is to be this darker antique bronze hardware. So it's a kind of a very dark brown, and it patinas a little bit with hands touching the handle, but it goes well. It's hard to see in this image, but over on the right side, there's an image of this handle on a white frame door. Building elevations, which we've seen, one thing that was added was that the rear elevation or the north elevation, and we'll see it again in a moment with the transformer and screening in front of that. The next. So here's a section through the building and the transformer in the back or the north side. You can see the dimensions. We're showing a 5-foot fence surrounding that transformer. There's plantings on the east and west side where there's space for it. Next slide. And here's a view taken kind of from the parking lot, showing that screen, the planting. You can see the planting beyond with the screen wall. We're on the left side and kind of on the right behind that tree. And it's about 2.5 to 3 feet below the elevation of the building. Here was some additional detail to show the, at the doors to the restrooms. We're looking to clad the door in wood. It's going to be a metal door that's insulated, which helps on our net zero initiative. And there's wood trim, which has sort of a 1-inch thick, kind of a white band kind of around the outside of the door, and the transom window above. And then that image on the right is kind of sort of what that corner would look like, where we've mitered shingles on the corner at the visitor center. And what's also nice about that image is it has a kind of a very thin white trim around it. Probably thinner than what we're showing. We'd like to hold it about 1 inch, but that's a little bit thinner. But it's a little bit more of a contemporary detail in sort of a historic language. And then there's some of these views that you've seen. Let's see. All those views show the current, what was decided upon for the screening, sort of the layered screening concept. And then we have a little section on signage. And so we looked at, this is something we would normally work on towards the end of the project, but we're going to show you, you've asked for it, but we're going to look at it here. We've looked at a number of different signs in Newburyport. One thing that came up last time was the desire for a font that is a little bit more historic and a little bit maybe more with uppercase and lowercase lettering. And so historic fonts usually have serifs, which is the little tabs at the sort of end of the letters. Kind of see that. So we picked 4 fonts that we think have a little bit historic character, but has slight contemporary look to it. We also looked at this sans serif font, Agrima, which it's a font without serifs, but it has, again, like the I has the little hatch at the top and bottom. So it has a little bit of a nod to the historic font. So we're looking at those, primarily the second one down on the left, Lucinda Fox and Agrima, we show in the next few images. We've also, go to the next one. We're also intending it to be a metal letter that is standoff on these little pins that stand off the wall. And again, as I said earlier, to match the door hardware, we're thinking that this would be a dark bronze, very dark brown letter. We also show an example of it in white, but go to the next slide. And so here's Lucinda Fox serif font on the building. Zoom in a little bit. We're showing 9-inch text on that, the side facade. And the rule of thumb on text is 1 inch for every 10 feet that you're standing back. So 9-inch text gets you to about the corner at Green Street. That's about 100 feet. So we're showing what would be visible probably from that corner. And then above, kind of in the shadow of the building, we show the 7-inch font. And we're resting that font on the white trim, which projects slightly from the building. It's attached to the wall, but it's in theory, it's resting on that trim. And in this case, we're showing all capital letters, but the B and the C are a little bit larger than the rest of the letters. And so it has a character of capitals and lowercase, but we find that all capitals is much more legible from a distance. Go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one. Another thing, and this just showing in this slide is we talked about adding a logo or the city seal somewhere on the building. We talked about putting it on say up on the wood shingles. Another idea is to use vinyl letters or vinyl backing on the glass. And so somewhere on that glass, you may have a little bit of signage that gives the hours to the visitor center, but one idea is to screen it on the glass. Next slide. This is again the Lucinda Fox font with lowercase. If you zoom in on, say, the front elevation, you can see what lowercase does. It wants to dip down below that little datum that was set up. And so we're not as happy with that font or with the lowercase letters. We like the large uppercase letter and then slightly smaller uppercase letters for the rest of the word. You know, the next one. What's that? This is the serif font. Again, the same size and same concept of larger first letter, a little smaller for the rest of the word. Capital letters. And then let's go to the next slide. And I don't think we necessarily have to decide on the exact font of the wording today. We're going in the right direction. Got your blessing on that. And then we look at it with white letters. It's a little deceiving here because that stands out in that against that shadowed rendering, the shadow line of the overhang. But that's an option instead of the black letter or the dark brown letter, to be a white letter. Also works very successfully. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Reactions from the board? Yes, Tom.
With respect to the,
you need to turn it on.
with respect to the transformer, I guess I was a bit surprised that the base elevation of the transformer is lower than the finished floor. Normally, you would think that it's electrical equipment, very similar to if you've seen housing where there's unit above. But I'm assuming you've spoken to someone, and independent of what they've said, this is something that the project management team of your firm, as well as the city of Newburyport planning department, is okay with. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, so I can do that. So elevation 12. At elevation 12 is the base flood elevation, and so we've set it at 13.5, so nothing up above that. And we've went through that with our electrical engineer. We're sitting at a similar elevation along the waterfront. The building obviously is a much larger structure, more difficult to raise in the future, and so we've set that at the 2061 business from elevation.
Okay, yeah, I agree it's more difficult. And we'll get into the details. You have to take all the conduit without bringing all the way stacks someplace else and run all through it. I won't bore you with those details. Secondly, and perhaps some of my planning board members can know more about this than I do, but I thought I heard with respect to the siding on the corners, you're putting some type of a chamfer on the site. So the only thing I would have thought that the siding's not necessarily real thick and it's on the corners and keep pushing by, that you would perhaps have a tendency to chip or crack or something versus some other architectural detail. But again, you're the expert as well as some of the people to the left and right of you. Thank you.
That is an interesting point. That's yeah, we could. I like the look of it in that corner. You know, any kind of wood siding on the corner, somebody could brush against it. There's a chance that it's snagged on it. So it's there may be a little bit more of a chance on this.
What would be the alternative?
Could put trim on the corner. Be a vertical board.
You fit each side of the shingle into that.
Yeah, exactly. Butts into it.
But the board, I definitely agree with the trim being lighter order is preferable than having sort of a white line and some other trim there.
I'll speak to this because I think I mentioned it. I was a lot more worried with the clappers. I know it can be done, but it's really hard.
It's a little bit.
But with the shingle, I'm less worried about it. I do, and the shingle's a smaller piece, so if there is a break, it's easier to repair. And the aesthetic is way nicer like this, so I'd take a chance on it personally.
I guess I was more worried about somebody snagging their sweater than the wood siding coming down.
Yeah. So I was just looking at the Harbor Master's shack, and that doesn't have the trim board at the corner, so it does just kind of fall in line with that. I had a question about the transformer fencing around it. Is that for safety or only for aesthetics and screening? And the reason I ask is I noticed that on the upper side, the south side, it's only 3 feet high, and so I was wondering about if there's a safety issue, whether that's high enough.
It's not a safety issue. It could be a standalone transformer.
Great. And with regard to the font, just for the record, I was doing some research, and I believe it's Lucidafax rather than Lucidafax. And but I think it's a really good font. It's an excellent font. I think everything around Market Square seems to be serif fonts, and that seems to be the theme of Market Square. So I would really push for that. And whether it's large and small caps or large caps and lowercase, I understand that there may be more legibility with the small caps as opposed to the lowercase. I kind of like the lowercase, but it's a matter of functionality. But I would argue for the serif.
While we're on the topic, can we hear from others on the font? Just to get Richard. Richard, sorry. Yes.
Good evening. I just had a couple of questions and clarifications that I wanted to ask of the architect. So the intent with whether it be the clapboard or the shingles is it for it to weather naturally and become gray, correct?
It is, yes.
So my experience is that the darker letter then obviously has a more robust standing out than say the white letter. And did I hear correctly that it was intended to be bronze and not stainless steel?
Yeah, exactly. Dark bronze or
dark bronze.
antique brown.
We do something similar at UMass where we have metal letters that are roughly about 6 inches off of the facade of our buildings so that they stand out. The other clarification question was, are you providing recessed lighting in that overhang canopy at the front to be able to help light up the facade as well as the lettering at night?
Yes, that's correct. And there's also a light at each door along the.
Yeah, I want the lettering to be able to, people to be able to see it. So clearly it's going to need some light because it is otherwise dark in the evening. And certainly you make a strong case for all caps versus caps and lowers will not read well at all.
Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, back to in the room. Other comments about anything?
I was just going to, if this is on or not.
Is it green?
It's turned red. It was green.
No.
Oh, it turned red.
You don't have that. This one.
I wondered if that's what the battery's dead. Yeah, I was just going to say I do like the look of the larger first letter and the caps going on as far as the font that you've shown there. I think is pleasing and visible. And, so I just wanted to make a comment. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I like the serif font in the capitals with the larger first letters. And I agree that the bronze, I prefer the bronze. I think it does, harken back a little bit to the good part. I guess I'm having a hard time envisioning what exactly the seal will look like.
I'm sorry,
The seal on the
seal,
yeah. As far as what colors or what exactly it's going to look like. But I think it, I appreciate that. I feel like it's at least something that makes it a little distinctive. I would prefer to see a little more, but I know it's a little late. And
I think the content is still up in the air a little bit. So, the one idea we have is we can make it sort of a much larger seal that may take up 2 windows or be, 3/4 of the seal. There's a number of graphic.
Kind of like a faded white almost. We haven't really fleshed out on the city side, on the administrative side of this, exactly what we might want to, whether it's the city seal or some other sort of sale type, logo or something. So we didn't necessarily want to pin that down specifically, but we like obviously the idea of recognizing that there are options here in addition to the tax nights. I would agree with the perhaps I guess the that structure, but we obviously want to allow a little bit of flexibility, recognizing that it should be done tastefully and subtly.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you could add a bronze piece like a clipper ship or a shift wheel or something on front as well too. I don't know if that makes it, if other people think that would make it tacky or, but I just, something, I could see a few more details being added to just really make it the Newburyport Visitor Center.
Just so we understand it correctly, do you see that, do you visualize that being on the side or the side as opposed to the front, or is that?
Yeah, I think the side or, on each side of the front or something.
Yeah.
I'm
each side of the front lobby area.
Yeah, or even, I mean, what is the sign that's in the garden there? Is that going to be a LED
this is
sign?
There are 2 of these kiosk type monument things going in, so that the firehouse, work with the chamber, we can make sure that we're able to rotate information about events with some flexibility going forward. So this is one of them.
Okay.
This would replace that very large sign that is the billboard that's there. So.
Okay.
Now, I'm just wondering, I'm with Ben about having logo and images to make it more us. Just curious why you chose to put them on the window. Wasn't the window supposed to be a big open space? And I don't remember why you argued for those really big windows, and now you're going to fill it up. So
well, I think the vinyl letters on the window, it could easily be, you could easily see through it. It's not a.
It's opaque or sort of semi-transparent.
Yeah, it's not opaque. It's semi-transparent, but it's At least that's what I have in my mind. It may not show as well in the image, but I think the idea is that there is as much transparency as possible with some graphics that can go on.
Would it fit, however, up next to the lettering?
It could, depending on the size.
And especially if you're going to do something creative, maybe put a ship or a wheel or a ship's wheel on either side, then that's all you've got. If something there, so it would be at the same level all the way around, and then we'd end up with this nice big, I don't know, hooked on them, big open windows.
Yeah.
I really think if you're going to have big windows like that, start putting something on it. It looks like, oh well, we can just put up an ad for, you know, cat sitting or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just me. I'm not making this decision for anybody else, but I feel like the windows ought to stay clean. Anybody else on anything? Yes, Bob.
Just a couple of thoughts. If we're brainstorming ideas about the city seal, there's another surface that's a possibility, which is in the surface of the paving in front of the building, so that it's a very prominent part of the pedestrian experience, and then you don't have really much of an issue at all with scale.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Material, you know, so I think that's a possibility versus, you know, things that are applied to the glass.
So I would offer it. Well, I mean, we haven't fleshed out this level of detail on for something like this, but you know, something to your point, I had looked at the possibility we had essentially the seal, you know, carved into granite, so it's just seal right in front of the visitor center right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think my thinking on the seal is that there's two scales. When you're at this distance, you see the sign, you approach the building, get up there, and your eyes are kind of maybe down. So whether it's on the glass at your eye level or on the ground, it's a good idea.
I think the signage identifies this as Newburyport, and the seal to me is kind of an extra, you know, graphic element, but it doesn't need to be as prominent as the signage on the building. It could be in the name. One other comment while we're talking about corners and details, I would agree that the shingle detail at the corners is a very typical New England detail. It's everywhere. So I'm not concerned about that at all. I am concerned about the wood applied to the doors and the amount of traffic that those doors are going to get, and what the edges look like in terms of detailing. That to me is a place where there could be lots of wear and tear over time.
That's a good point.
And I think it needs to somehow be protected at the end. So you're showing a very kind of continuous flush detail, which I get and I agree with. But I think there needs to be something protecting that edge corner, whether that's a metal edge or something.
That's a good point. And we're still in development on the exact product and detail. I've done this before on a project probably 5 years ago in Chicago, and maybe try to see how that held up. We're doing it on a project right now in Hearst College. And so I'm still, I admit it's in the process of being fully vetted, and I hear your concern, and I wouldn't want it to fall apart if we can't get it to work. We won't do it, but it's
I can offer that too. I mean, I'm not the architect, I don't leave it to the folks to debate. But I kind of like the idea of having almost like a thin metal trim in order to make that corner really durable.
Yeah.
To me, I think definitely, to me, that seems very practical compared to not having something that's metal there. Even if I do think it should be very thin though, but I think it, thinking of really durable.
Yeah. But I'm concerned when I hear we can't make it work, we won't do it at all, because then the doors are very different from the surrounding.
We'll make it work. We just have to iron out the specific details of the product and actually putting it together.
Yeah, the only other question I had, we talked last time you were here about mechanical equipment on the roof. Can you just walk us through that one more time?
Yeah, you can see it here. This is, that's the size of it, and it pokes up about 6 inches above the roof line, but it's in the middle of the roof. So when you're down on the ground, you're not going to see it.
What is that?
That is it's a ERV, energy recovery. And there's 2 of them side by side in the center of the roof. You can actually see them in the roof plan. Back to that rendered roof plan, they're in there. One that's, it's a site plan, sorry, a little further back. It's that colored site plan.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Now here it shows us 1. Oh no, there are 2. There was originally 1 that was taller. We got down to 2 shorter ones. So the taller one might have been visible in the distance. These will not be visible. There's 2 of them.
And they're taller than the photovoltaic panels.
Yeah, they're going to be a little bit taller than the photovoltaic. So see, the photovoltaics don't get above the roof line. And what's not shown on there is the little structure that holds up the solar panels, but the
Thank you.
Just following up again on the idea of the seal, I agree that if we're going to have the big windows, if we were going to put it in the building, I would raise the base of the windows, put the seal below it. But I think the idea of putting it on the table is a very good idea. I didn't mention anything about the color before, but go along with the bronze idea. And in terms of the door cladding, and when we have the final decision, if we have maybe review by the planning director of the final decision, but it need change from the general thing that we're seeing in terms of the final design is more than a minor change.
Oh, I agree with that entirely. Yes.
Anyone else on anything that we've seen tonight? Or anything we may have forgotten to pick up on? Okay, so we're at a point where wait a minute, call for public comment. If you would like to speak, so your name, your address, and let's hear from you. Yes, there's nobody, so I'll close public hearing. Public comment. Sorry. Please speak. It's not closed. It's open.
What's that?
I just reopened it.
Okay. Thank you all for your attention to detail. I cannot even fathom thinking about the edging on clapboard-sided houses the way that you all did. So thank you for that, and the comments on the use of the bathroom doors, making sure that they're going to be durable. Very much appreciate all of that, and just want to continue to say thank you for your efforts here.
All right, now I'll close the public comment section of the hearing. Bring it back to the board, and I think we're at a point where we should read through the decision and see there's some suggested edits in it, and 2 special conditions we may want to add to those.
I'm sorry, but just for clarification, did you want to do any of that on screen other than looking at the language? Do you want to do markup on screen or just indicate those here and we can catch up with that later? So I understand.
What's easiest for you? So
if we make it clearly we follow later, that's probably easier, I think.
So you don't have to keep.
Yeah, it might just be more efficient for us timelines.
Okay. So I'm gonna jump in the procedural history. I just want to read this section that was language that Andy says was added per request of Rick or slightly modified verbiage, but consistent with intent. The proposed work that requires a downtown overlay special permit consists of 1, demolition of the existing visitor center building and public restroom structure, and 2, the construction of the new combined visitor center restroom building and associated landscaping and screening structures immediately surrounding this new structure as depicted on the most recent revised plans referenced here. Okay, clear? Okay. The second page under plans and documents, I just want to clarify, is there anything that has been discussed tonight that needs to go into updated plans? Or elevations or anything that's going to be on that are on this list? For example, exterior elevations rendered. We don't want to have all the options. We want to have just the one that we decide on.
Yes, we did get black and white line drawings for the elevations to go with that. So we do have those already with this most recent set of illustrations they have in the presentation. So those would be incorporated in the plan references that Cable would insert upon closing of the hearing.
Well, you just showed us in my collaborative. Did I miss that?
Yeah, it does. The graphic is the same. It's just lines, but the notation, there's a little notation. You zoom in on, say, one of the side elevations. Little EWA, which our term for exterior wall assembly, 01A, and it's listed up on the upper right corner of the sheet. 01A is wood shingles, and 01B is shiplap boards.
Okay,
So,
and the boards are just on the doors.
the boards are on the sort of the bathroom volumes. Yeah, that the lower part. Yes.
But that's a general question. We want to make sure that all the plans and the documentation are in place to go with the approved plan. And nothing's sort of dangling and needs to be followed up. And if it does need to be followed up, let's catch it and put it in there as a condition. Go forward with the decisions.
Small, quick technical question, if I may ask. I may have missed this in the review, but because these are all single stalls, are they identified as simply unisex, right? Not men, women?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. They're all accessible to. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Former ADA accessible for changes.
Maybe you should stand up there just in case.
Just to add, there's 4 of those restrooms are ADA accessible and 4 of them have baby changing tables, family rooms.
So that brings up an issue. I think I remember reading that in the winter or off season, only 2 of them would be open.
That's correct.
So one would be ADA and one.
No, 2 open ones will be ADA and.
A question. Thank you. And that's the answer all in one. Thanks.
This maybe probably is just a logistical question for Candy, but when there are big events downtown in the winter, will they be able to open more restrooms, or is it just?
Yeah, I don't think they presented that we're prohibited from doing that. We're just trying to save energy, obviously.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to speak to that, but you know, obviously there's fluctuation in energy depending on weather events and so forth. But I think it's more about making sure we're not unnecessarily needing extra space.
Right. I'm just thinking like Santa Parade.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And part of what we wanted to do with this facility was to make sure that both the visitor and the restrooms could be used year round, even though we haven't thus far been doing that. So
yeah, my understanding was that it wouldn't be used in the winter. So 6 of them would be offline. And I guess I would need to check on how easy it is to turn on and off the plumbing and the heat, basically. But if that's important, we can.
Yes.
So let's follow up on that. I was under the impression just a little bit of a question, but
yeah,
let's just clarify. Yeah, that is in fact what we just talked about in the scope for the network. Before we go out. Obviously, this is not lined up, unfortunately, for next spring, so might take a little longer, but I agree with that.
While we're on the subject of toilets and signage, will the signage related to those doorways be the same material and character as the?
Yeah, it would. It'll be.
So it's dark bronze.
Yeah, it's the intent.
Is it on every door or?
It would be on every door. So it would be either on the door or next to the door. But it's a code required. So
yeah.
Because we're not quite exactly sure what the graphic would be. I think the gender neutral sign.
going back to the plan that's here. And I understand that next time we're going to have to revise the site plan. I think it would be good to take out of this list anything that's not specifically related to the visitor center. By that I mean the 75% drawing set, because we know that's not going to be applicable anymore.
Certainly, I would concur with that.
I would strip out everything except really probably the elevations, the specific site plan for the plaza and so forth.
Maybe the final layout that has been adjusted accordingly to match this here.
Because you're going to have to come back with the next meeting with a complete set of updated 75% plans with all the plumbing, all the drainage and utilities and everything revised to match the new site plan.
I 100% agree with that. Thank you.
So I think this list of plans and documents can be very short.
Great.
Good. That starts to clean it up a little bit. I am not sure it's necessary to read through all of the findings.
And Rick, if I'm not mistaken, we previously reviewed that sort of set the stage for tonight. We actually reviewed some of that. There's one meeting,
Oh, yes, we went through. We started going through the findings.
But unless there were further changes, we would have already covered that context.
You were thinking. Oh, good. Oh.
Save everybody's time.
Yeah, public disclosure in your moment that was unnecessary. Fabulous. So maybe we just jump to the special conditions. Is that what you're saying? Jump to the special conditions.
Sure.
Yeah. Anybody have any problem with that? All right.
Let me just ask.
Yeah, because
should we? I guess I'm wondering about the 3-year permit. Whether we want to extend that.
Which item is that?
Item 2 under standard conditions. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a great point, and I believe that I don't have it in front of me. I believe that we did that in the site plan decision for the same reason. I think it's a 5-year time frame, recognizing it now phase 1 of the park. We don't necessarily see that big issue, but I would concur and request if we could carry the same language from the site plan decision of the 5 years. That would be preferable. Okay, thank you.
Conditions last time. So we will go to the special conditions. Right now there are only 2. In accordance with the associated site plan approval issued for Market Landing Park expansion, the site plans referenced in the same, the applicant shall install the proposed site level landscaping and screening adjacent to this building commensurate with construction of the proposed visitor center / restroom facility. This condition is to ensure that the proposed series of restroom doors are adequately screened. That work for everybody? Yes. Okay. And 2, consistent with the aforementioned site plan approval issued for Market Landing Park expansion, the most recent revised plans referenced above herein shall control for the proposed layout, landscaping and screening structures immediately surrounding the proposed new visitor center restaurant facility, notwithstanding any prior or earlier plan references which would otherwise be in conflict. Consistent with both permits, site plan approval and the special permit, the applicant shall reconcile any associated plan discrepancies prior to bidding and construction of the project, regardless of any phasing that may be required due to limited funds. This raises the issue of something that I spoke to Andy and Rick about, and that is that we were going to propose for the next meeting that we have a very short discussion and approval of a minor modification to the site plan review decision that we made prior to make sure that those plans are in fact consistent with what we just decided for the landscaping and anything that's around the visitor center that would be relevant to the site plan decision. And that would make it really clean so that what is has been submitted for that decision stays the original plan. And then it has a minor modification to do exactly really what condition 2 is talking about. And it just makes it really clear that the 2 plans must be, the 2 decisions must have consistent. Go ahead.
If I could just speak to that, so I 100% agree, and this is the share screen really. So this is really the envelope of the area that we're talking about, where the DOD special permit, the landscaping is obviously very integral to that that work for the architecture and screening. So this, what we'd effectively be doing with the minor modification, is to take the overall plan that the board has previously approved for the site, substitute for this area, the plan here, and insert that in there in the site plan review as the most recent plan set, so that there's consistency as the chair said between the 2 decisions. And with this language here, we wouldn't have to revisit this decision, but we would have to revisit the site plan review just to catch it up to what you've adjusted here.
And I think it's actually a little bit more than that, because I think there were some elements of prior plan set that didn't agree with each other anyway. I think there was some, I don't recall, I think there were some issues with we saw some changes to the, for example, the shared use path, and we never saw revised grading that went along with this layout plan. So this would be bringing all of that up to date. So just not just conforming the site plan to this decision, but also conforming the landscaping and grading and drainage and everything to the site plan.
Sure, if I could to that point, and I do want to, I don't know if Maren wanted to speak to this if necessary, but my sense in discussing, just because of the time frame of the project and where Sasaki is with the work, I guess I had understood that to be where the board had already approved the layout there, that we were in that decision, we were conditioning basically that the bid documents had to be revised accordingly to make to reconcile those details according to the approved plan, rather than. I think it might be difficult. I guess the question here is it might be difficult for Sasaki to close that completely, because that would require, I think, to some extent, the bid level documents for November 2nd, which would be probably too soon. So I don't know if, I guess maybe a question for Maren, but has the grading or any other details on that have been adjusted to match the layout that's been approved by the board? If not, then I don't know. Because I guess I was assuming that we were implementing that by when we commissioned that, implementing it by the bid documents, reconciling it, rather than in quick order, 2 weeks coming back and something that here, we already understood that to be an obligation. So here, I think we were assuming that we were only that happy to substitute the area near the building for those approved plans. And it's really recognizing that you approved the layout, a certain layout, and it's just the grading detail that we doesn't.
Yeah, my understanding is consistent with what Andy is saying, and that we would be submitting bid documents that were consistent with the materials and layout.
And then we would provide those to the board.
For review.
Well, confirming that it complies with the reconciliation with the most recent layout that we approved. So recognizing that the grading adjustment will only be a minor, a minor contour adjustment, not like significant, changing what happened with those plan sets. That because you've already approved a certain layout, for instance, an earlier plan said, let's say hypothetically, an earlier plan set might not have shown everything exactly where the granite, entrance is. The most recent layout clearly shows the wide entrance and everything. So if there's an adjustment or a reconciliation and any other details that go after our bid documents, that can easily be done to jive with that. But I wonder whether or not it's necessary to have all that level of detail for the bid level document to the board versus complying with that condition for the bid document, providing that verification for the board as an administrator. And then with this one, going back to the site plan review at the next meeting, as the chair said, and substituting this rectangular area essentially into that prior approval of layout. Again, it's a question of efficiency, mechanics and so forth, but I don't feel that I don't feel that there's anything lost, in that process. To me, it's just ends up being a little bit more efficient when you think about the piece that I can move around, but do that either.
I understand that, we would, I guess, as I said before, we wouldn't do this for anybody else except for the city. Anyway, and I don't think I'm talking about bid level documents, but if it's really important to the city to not get a complete, conforming site plan together for the final tool, then, and I understand we've got there's a lot of more constraints. It's just that typically we wouldn't do this, right? We would say, this is the plan. Yeah, and we don't usually talk about bid documents. But I understand you're kind of conflating or combining the idea of 100%, final plan set with bid documents, which we don't really do. But I guess I'm okay with it as long as we have some way, or it goes out to bid, that somebody on the board can review this and make sure we're okay with it.
If it's all right, maybe adding a special condition that the chair and the vice chair review that package to verify that it's consistent with the most recent plan.
That on the site plan, or this is when we go back to the site?
I would say that's
November 2nd.
the site plan, because that's the phase piece is going to run right away, and that's the overall overlap and reconciling. So I think that we can adjust it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I made a couple of notes from tonight's discussion, wondering if it's necessary to make the conditions or if they just would show up in the plans and take care of. One had to do with open-ended discussion about where any kind of imagery should go, the seal, etc. It seems like that's not finalized yet, but I want it to be recognized.
If the board wants a condition that I say prohibits, but requires I don't think that that's necessarily a problem to keep the transparency of the windows. I think Dan is correct in pointing out that that's an option. I think it can be tastefully done and subtly done, but I don't think that's necessarily an issue from the city's perspective. I think we do want that transparency in the window, and I think that what we're trying.
Well, it's more about just having the image, period, regardless of where it goes, and the font. Decision that we went with the applicant's choice on that one. So I think that'll just show up in the plan. That's not an issue, but I think which images are used and where they're located, I think should go in as a condition for the return to the planning board.
If the city wishes to insert any art or logos or whatnot, that should return to the board for review.
Yeah. That'll be condition number 3.
Is that only to do with the building itself? For example, if the city wanted to do an engraved seal or compass or something on the pavement, would that be covered by this?
Yes.
As well?
Yeah. I'll use Andy's language of approval on the building.
Unless you want to explicitly exempt that if it's elected by the city, that's just a big option. Maybe figure that out. It's up to you.
On the building or on the site. That will take care of it. What about winter usage for large events? That sounds like it needs to be looked at because it means turning on plumbing, etc. How do we handle that?
I guess my thought there is that really something that function of the planning board or providing, the physical building, whatever, and the use of it to me should be left to the administration, but that's just my opinion.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for getting me off that detail.
I agree with that comment. However, I do also agree with the point that was made, and that is something we want to maintain the option. So we're not shooting ourselves in the foot later on when we want to expand, year-round activities a little better. We definitely will be implementing that regardless.
Okay, so I'll just leave that to you guys. So any other items or issues that we discussed tonight should be included in the special permit, special condition. Then are we ready to take a vote on the special permit?
So I do have a question, and we're voting right now. Earlier, there was a comment made about revising or modifying the plans and documents in the decision. Am I correct in understanding that someone?
No, it's for the site plan review decision.
We're talking about removing items from this. We did talk about removing items from this list.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
And all I want to say is that that's fine. And then when you read the special conditions, I just want to be sure someone says where it says the aforementioned plans and documents, that's all consistent. That's all.
To your point, I think it might be recognized here that with not guys, if we just adjust the phrasing in here to take out the
whatever
recent, because there would only be one plan sets there are reference at the top. it's just more of a housekeeping type language. Yes, so I agree with that. Sure.
Good point. Thank you. I misunderstood the question. Okay, so we'll take care of this decision first, and then we'll do something about real site plan minor modification for next meeting. So we have a motion recommended by the staff, and if somebody wants to make it, they may read the motion. Come on and make it. You still awake? Have you got a mic?
But I don't have the document.
Oh. And from all of this.
Oh, yes.
So a motion to approve the downtown overlay district special permit application for 24 Merrimack Street, market landing park expansion and restroom visitor facility as drafted by the Office of Planning and Development with the incorporation of the associated findings and special conditions amended tonight.
Thank you. I'll take it. So Alden makes the motion. A second. Oh, good. That. Thank you. Any further discussion? I don't see anybody picking up a mic, so I will go through the roll call for approval. Alden?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Bob?
Yeah.
Don?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Bonnie? Yes. The special permit is approved. And
Thank you all for your
thank
time.
you. And so what we would like to do is to have you come back for a minor modification just to clean up the details around the consistency of the landscaping and other site details on the site plan review decision we made a few weeks ago.
Right, so and just mechanically, you probably will only see me on that piece of it because it'll just be the plan references. You probably wouldn't see the society notes coming back the next meeting, but I will come back to you with that minor modification. We'll sort of run it through the open gov system, but you'll get it as a request to the board because it's not a staff level.
Okay, so we'll get a request.
Yeah, so we'll take it on the agenda and just take it up then.
Okay, great.
So we'll have a basically a certificate of vote that will come out of that consistent with like we've done before, where it references the updated plan.
So this is fond farewell. Thank you very much for your good efforts, and we appreciate it. And I think we'll close out the public hearing on that, which we did effectively by taking the vote. So we are done with that. All right. All we have left on the agenda is approval of the minutes from October 5th. And do you have a motion? Okay.
Beth, would you mind just saying as I made a very minor comment, my guess is others
Motion
did too.
to approve the October 5th meeting minutes amended.
And we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Don, I'll take Don this time. Okay, and I'll take roll call on that. Don? Alden?
Yes.
I need the list. Yeah?
Yes.
Rick?
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes,
Okay.
I was there in person.
Okay. I missed you, sorry. Bob?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
And I abstain. Other updates. First thing, well, Andy, do you have any updates?
I do. You want to do I just have a couple real quick, or do you want me to?
No, there's no rush.
Oh no, I don't want to commit everybody here. But a couple things real quick. One is the comprehensive economic development plan that we're working on. Tom, Bob, I think you're our liaison. We've already got worked out from the planning board for that, which is great. Obviously, in planning initiatives, we want to make sure there's someone who's a stakeholder from this group, at least at a bare minimum, for those discussions outside of the usual master plan process, where you're clearly the board that is primary on that. So for that, it's great. We have the housing production plan that we're also getting going on. So again, I just wanted to toss out there the possibility of any sort of liaison or volunteer if there is before we get going in that process with a consultant. If there's anybody from this board who would like to serve as a sort of liaison to that,
Are we absolutely required to?
we're not required to. It's just helpful to make sure it's sort of a general public, stakeholder input. It's a good practice. They don't necessarily have to. We're obviously have the housing trust. We focused on that with our office and other stakeholders, but we're being a key one. If you want to have someone with a liaison, otherwise, we're happy to kind of get your feedback on the draft as it's big work.
So if anyone is eager to learn more about affordable housing and all the ins and outs of that, housing production, it's all about.
I mean, I do that all day long, but I'd like to know what the timing is maybe before I can.
Sure, it's probably going to be reviewing the drafts for the most part, and not something to be very light on meetings. I would say
even better.
More about reviewing the drafts, maybe 3 meetings. I would say over the course of a 9-month period, 6 to 9 month period.
Asynchronous, as we say. I like that.
Daytime meetings. I don't know if
That'd be interesting. That'd be interesting.
Thank you. And again, if you can't do I'm gonna say, I wasn't, I'll leave it to you on the, I don't know if you want to discuss the membership change number adjustment issue, but CPTC, the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative, does trainings. And so I didn't have a chance today to send out an email, but I want to send an email to you tomorrow, just with a link to these fall workshops that they have periodically. Some of you have gone to them before. I think some of you have been to a bunch of them, but for those of you who haven't, there's a couple of different trainings that they do. And if you're interested in doing them, I'll basically be suggesting that you go on here, register yourself for the ones that are available for the rest of the season, and then do this in the spring, typically in the fall. It covers different things, generic planning, more to the point maybe for some of the stuff we do regularly, things like special permits. A lot of the stuff you might have already seen, but you get a lot of good tips and things about better how to handle things, being better prepared. So it's a relatively low cost for us. We're able to, pay for that. I think it's beneficial if you're able to do it. So basically the bottom line is, for emails I've sent before this years past, I'll send an email if you can register yourself. And then if you get an email confirmation, forward that to me and Diane in the office. And that way we can make sure that the invoice gets paid with a check from the city. There's an option there rather than pay online. Just send a check, just do that, send it to us. The email that you get is confirmation. We'll use that as an invoice to pay. And that way we can have this, both CPA planning board members generally go to these trainings that are sometimes helpful. And I'll leave the details of location, time, and all that kind of stuff to their website.
Why don't you update everybody on progress being made, change membership, and the process that has to go through the city council?
Sure. I don't know. I'll leave it to you if you want to speak to the sort of intent and so forth. But we've talked about making an adjustment. We're going to 9-member board making an adjustment, having it whether be sort of 7 with some alternates. And I'll bring it by to talk a little bit if they like. But mechanically, we're having it reviewed. Rick has been working on some language here. We have ran it by KP. We've got some revised version from Rick responsive to those comments. So just want to confirm with KP again. I will then translate that into a little bit of adjustment in the language or preamble type stuff. Just put that into a zoning ordinance that can be sponsored. I would ask the committee chair, typically the planning development committee chair, which I'm sure you'd be happy to bring that on the council docket. That would go to committee. I assume we'd have the chair and the vice chair at the committee meeting just to walk through that again with me. And presumably, if the council doesn't seem to really object to it, we'll support that, and the council would then vote on that first and second reading, and then we'd eventually see Unicode catch up online. So it'll be a couple months before we have that, see that adjustment approved by the council, so to speak. But that would be the process. We would, I think having some sort of a letter or a memo briefly from the board, so to speak, with the chair and vice chair would be helpful to say, as background. But I would suspect the council would, just like they did with the housing trust for the last year or so, they made an adjustment on their membership as well, and we're basically just adjusting the city code accordingly. So I don't want to speak to the
sure. So there were 2 ordinances. It turns out as I went through it with KP's feedback, it became clearer to me that there's a general city ordinance about the membership of the planning board, and then there's and that's one thing. And so that draft ordinance, proposed ordinance, reduces the membership from 9 to 7 and has a provision in there for a transition period as people drop off the board, so it can go from 9 to 8 to 7 over time. KP had a question about how we should set the effective date, and I thought that I tried to rewrite the transition period so we didn't have to worry about specific dates. So we could just do it as people either resigned or their terms expired.
And I think the primary concern was worrying about mainly the chair and the vice chair having to worry about when they go to meetings, you know, to try to determine who's actually on the board at that point, who's the board member, you know. So that was their point. Yeah.
And then the second ordinance is the amendment to the zoning ordinance, because right now the zoning ordinance basically says a special permit granting authority is the zoning board, and it takes 5 votes to grant a special permit. But we know that we need to actually have 2/3 of the board. And so I added a section to that special permit granting section saying that that first of all, there are two associate members who can be appointed, who can fill in when a board member is absent, and that the number of votes required is 6 if we have 8 or 9 members and 5, or basically 2/3. It basically says 2/3 of the members, which is 6 for 8 or 9 members and 5 for 7 members. And along with that, there was a law that was passed last year that specified that a simple majority vote is what's required for a special permit for certain types of housing related special permits. So I included that in there just for clarification. And we probably should do that. Probably should amend that for the zoning board as well, if that ever comes up. That's an issue right now where zoning isn't quite in line with the state law.
Yes, yeah, this is an artifact of that. You know, obviously the state statute is going to supersede here, but to resolve any language, it's helpful to go back and, you know, and as we point out, I mean, this is the administrative section was originally written only for zoning board of appeals. It's not. If you review it, it's actually even more as if the zoning board of appeals is the only permit granting authority. And in fact, you've obviously seen over years a lot of permits being given to the planning board. You know, and so we just want to make sure that section really adequately covered. So I think that's great. And obviously we'll be doing some adjustments to that section. It's that is in addition to site plan review triggers, one of the housekeeping areas I want to address this as well with the council.
And just one other little detail. The associate members are only called on for a special permit. Mention that because it's all around special permit granting authority. So if there's just site plan review or an AMR or a minor application, we don't need to call them. And we'll just have to work out what that means, because I'm still not clear if we're in the middle of, you know, we've had, say, 2 public hearings and we're on the 3rd one, and we're ready to take a vote. And the associate members, you know, haven't been participating, but all of a sudden somebody's out sick, can't come to the meeting. We don't have enough other members. That's the most obvious situation. Have you ever worked with that?
I think as long as the associate member is present in the meeting, then it's fine.
But that means that they have to be there at every meeting.
Not at every meeting. You don't have a special permit.
No, but if my scenario is.
If you can verify you listen to the recording, of course, we can have other people.
But only one.
Right. Again, this is, I agree there's a potential issue there. I've always seen us over time, and you know, lots of other communities always potentially come close once in a while, but never actually get to that problem. And so that's part of the reason why we're constantly reaching out and asking you to verify your attendance. And for one meeting, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but as you think about long term, when hearings go several weeks or months, it becomes a problem to try to reach an end conclusion where the board actually has enough people that can vote on it one way or the other, up or down.
I think the other part of it is associate member, assuming that a current member doesn't become an associate member, but an associate member is a way for somebody to become part of the farm team for the board and kind of learn things as they're going along and graduate to be a full member. And I think the idea would be that we would like to have everybody attend all meetings, and that essentially what it does for us is it gives us a 9-member board, but only the requirement for 5 votes for special permit. So if somebody, if Alden lives next door to a property that has a special permit and he can't do it, we know that in advance. So we know that that somebody else is going to have to fill in at some point to vote on it, but they can still participate in discussions.
That's my experience from being an alternate at the beginning of the zoning board and becoming a full member. But and I don't know how much the words matter, but alternate versus associate, because the idea with an alternate is, as long as you participate in the hearings, you can pitch it any night that it's necessary. And to your point, the whole benefit is to expedite permits so people don't have to make cancellations or make unnecessary continuances if there's enough people around that can do it.
It's just that associate is the word that's used in state statute. So that's what
I see it.
Okay, so it's going to get worked out. We're moving toward that, and as soon as it can get finalized, the amendment can be finalized, will be and sponsored by Kevin. We'll go to that everything on your list? Do you have anything more? No. All right, I have something really important. We are scheduled for a meeting on December 21st. Would anyone like to meet on December 21st? Okay, so I'm going to officially say and let the office know that we are not meeting on December 21st. So we have one meeting in December. Now the next meeting is January 4th. And I'm going to leave that on the calendar because if there are any applications or any business we have to deal with, we will do it that night. But if nothing comes up, and is anybody in the office during the last week of December to find out if anything's come up?
Yeah, we're in. Obviously, there might be one people out, but we're in. And obviously, you have to let know there's nothing in it want to cancel. I don't know. It's nice to know in advance if there's anybody or a number of people on the board who would have a problem with that date being right after the first. But preferable to not have a long gap between a cancellation. So if it works for you, we keep it on and then cancel if we get there. There's nothing that needs to be done.
Beth, when does school start out? It's too far away for you to worry about.
I go.
Because I'm just thinking people may be in town anyway. I'm not going to arbitrarily.
Yeah, I would assume. I mean, I don't know what.
Holiday Mondays, no, Sunday's the first. So yeah, we'll be.
I would just assume they would do that.
It's going to be almost a full business as usual. So I'm going to leave the 4th on there, unless if we get closer to it, we will see their schedules are going to make it difficult.
So I did actually have one update, which was at the last meeting, I said we were going to have waterfront west zoning done for this meeting. And since then, I've had the discussion with Bonnie about the city council and community. Well, just that there's things are going on. We don't want to get ahead of the city. So it will be sometime, perhaps maybe something like that.
Good. So I haven't got anything else. Anybody else has anything else? I think we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Alden.
Okay, Alden, second. Thank you, Bob. And the roll call, Alden?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Bonnie, yes. Thank you, everybody. Good early evening.